This episode of the Tech Life podcast is brought to you by SendPro from Pitney Bowes. SendPro has 3 times the features of Stamps.com at 1/3 the price. Visit pb.com/techlife to learn more and try it free for 90 days. After that, you'll get SendPro for only $5 per month. That's pb.com/techlife.
Welcome to the Tech Life with Rich Conte, bringing you stories from the front lines of the tech industry and the insider's perspective on starting, growing, or thriving in a technology venture.
Welcome to another episode of Silicon Harbor Radio, brought to you by the Tech Life podcast and Silicon Harbor Magazine. I'm your host, Rich Conte. Each episode, we take you inside Charleston's rapidly growing tech and startup community and give a voice to the local entrepreneurs and other contributors driving that growth. Today, we feature a Charleston-based digital design and development studio that has been gathering a lot of attention lately, thanks in part to its unique operating model. This episode is brought to you by SendPro from Pitney Bowes. I'm sure most listeners are familiar with Pitney Bowes as a well-known established brand, but they are revolutionizing their business model and product offerings with SendPro and taking on Stamps.com head-to-head. With SendPro, you can print stamps right from your computer, saving time and money with no special equipment. But SendPro also lets you compare shipping rates and delivery times between the USPS and other major carriers to ensure you always get the best deal when you ship packages. You can then print paid shipping labels for USPS, UPS, and more, as well as track your shipments, all from the same intuitive, user-friendly interface. No one likes waiting in line at the post office, and Pitney Bowes has also negotiated special rates for SendPro users, helping you save 3 cents per stamp or more. SendPro is the perfect solution for e-commerce businesses. They offer flexible payment options that allow you to mail now and pay later. You can learn more at pb.com/techlife. Sign up and you'll get SendPro free for 90 days, along with a free 10-pound scale. When your free trial is over, you'll get SendPro for only $5 a month, and that rate is good for the lifetime of your subscription. That's $5 a month for SendPro versus $15.99 a month for Stamps.com. That's 3 times the features, 1/3 the price. But you can only get this deal for a limited time by going to pb.com/techlife. That's pb.com/techlife to take advantage of this incredible offer. Pitney Bowes are masters in the craft of making your business succeed, and I want to thank SendPro for sponsoring us here at Silicon Harbor Radio. As the technology and startup communities here in Charleston continue to grow, we've seen a variety of contract studios emerge to satisfy the need for digital design and development bandwidth and expertise. The level of services and the type of talent that these studios deliver often varies, but they all typically employ a similar business and operating model. The challenges faced by this type of business are largely rooted in finding and retaining the quality design and engineers that are necessary to meet the customer's increasingly demanding needs. One studio here in Charleston is taking a unique approach to meeting these challenges and are potentially changing the game for how the development for hire business works. Our guest on this episode of Silicon Harbor Radio, brought to you by the Tech Life podcast and Silicon Harbor Magazine, are Logan Edwards and Jordan Cardwell. They are partners at Fount. Welcome to the show, Logan and Jordan.
Thanks for having us, Rich. Yeah, thanks.
Guys, can you start by telling listeners a little about Fount, what services you provide, and what type of customers you serve?
Fount is considered a digital product agency of sorts. The way we look at ourselves is a collective of software developers and creatives who really take charge of the company's direction and mission. But the services we provide are very similar to other services in the area for digital products and such.
We're not really any one thing as far as specialization of work is concerned, or at least we don't have any one particular set direction. So we could be completely different next month depending on the work that we take on. And we've all got varied experience in different languages, stacks, and platforms. And developer interest essentially dictates what type of work we take on.
And just to dive in more specifically to the type of stuff we do, and we are usually in the web world with web applications and mobile applications, but we also provide architecture and engineering and consulting guidance, depending on what the needs are for the clients. And it gives a pretty varied list of skills that we can offer partners. The partners that we work with, it's really based on team interest. So we have projects anywhere from a solo entrepreneur with an idea and all the way up to public companies and everywhere in between.
Now, you hinted a little bit of this just now, but what do you think makes Fount different from other design and development studios?
Well, from a customer's viewpoint, we really want to reduce friction around ramp up and onboarding. We've got senior talent, and they're used to adding value at day one. Also, Fount is a flat organization, so the customer doesn't end up paying for a lot of unnecessary bureaucracy and layers and potentially extra services that they don't need when they're trying to get a project completed. We want to make it a point to connect the right human with the right opportunities throughout our pipeline. So the customer gets to know who they're going to be working with early on, from the initial contact through the project scoping phase. Also, all of our partners are really passionate about their technology interests and continually improving their skills. So clients really always get the cream of the crop, or people that are highly motivated. This really differs from the traditional agency approach, where there's a lot of pressure to increase margins. So what ends up happening is a lot of junior talent gets forced onto certain projects at senior rates in an effort to increase profits. And that can really affect project outcomes as well as developer experience overall.
So just to build on that, that's a pretty good idea on like what the customer needs, like Fount to provide something that's different. Internally, we have a few mechanisms that make Fount interesting for the creatives and developers that work with us. And they're mainly focused on sort of three big ideas: democracy, ownership, and transparency. The democracy pillar, every decision is voted on internally. And so that's anything from selecting what projects we want to work on, what teams we're going to form for those projects, to bringing on new talent or removing talent from Fount overall. And it's architected in a way that prevents any single owner or any single large equity holder to be protected from that kind of stuff. And so that helps keep us honest. And moving on, ownership is another big part of that. And democracy plays into that. But when you get into a company, if you have a vested interest in the company, you think you're going to make better decisions for the company's future direction overall. And having a quickly vested path for ownership allows individuals to take the reins and think about a holistic approach to running a company, as opposed to just a single guy who owns a company and just directs everything what to do. And so going down the chain, transparency is another big piece of like how Fount operates. Essentially everything internally in the company is transparent and open with each other. So everyone knows each other's rates. Everyone knows what projects we're working on. And it helps keep an honest environment between everyone. And it helps with the democratic environment for decision making too.
On your website, you got an interesting way of describing this ethic and operating model that you've adopted. Can you share a bit about that with listeners?
The founders all have different backgrounds. We have different experience, different utopian ideals for how to run a company. But we all agree that sort of the traditional corporate MO is dated. And as it turns out, pirates in the 18th century had really figured out the solution. They operated outside the law, and so the government was after them. But they developed systems internally to incentivize crew members for retention and to maximize profits. So they were solving a lot of these similar problems. They wanted a democratic system. They wanted a system based on a meritocratic system, and they also wanted equal sharing. And so a lot of the crew members that would come from merchant ships, that was sort of how we look at traditional business today. There was a large pay inequality between captains and crew members. The captains were not often fit for duty because it was like some guy climbing the corporate ladder, if you will, or it was some friend's recommendation. And so he was just kind of put in there and making some good money. And there was also subpar treatment of sailors often. And this is not always the case, but this is a largely driving force behind piracy in the 18th century and sort of the golden age. And so what we said is, how do we take what pirates learned and apply them to the modern business attitude? And that really is what started the entire drive and ethic of Fount. And I have to get credit to one of the co-founders, Ryan Van Middlesworth. He was deep into reading about pirate economics and what allowed pirates to be successful, and said, hey guys, let's run a company like a pirate ship.
And to go a little bit further with some of those points, we want to have a meritocracy. So we want everything to be merit-based. In a traditional business, it's not, or a lot of times it's not what, but who you know, which is really demoralizing within an organization, unless you're the one who happens to know the owner and you're getting excessive promotions and that sort of thing. Also, traditionally, employees are often locked into a salary that's less than they desire and some percent-based annual raise schedule. At Fount, the market determines your rate. So if you provide more value, you're compensated for it. This all means that we're more concerned with how do we get the right person for the job? And that means, less red tape as far as organizational hierarchy is concerned and less financial overhead overall. as far as that egalitarian sharing is concerned, we want to ensure that those who provide real value, such as the developers and software company, are recognized and compensated for that, for their contribution towards the success of a particular project or the company as a whole. The developers get the majority of the rate charged for their services, and all full-time pirates are awarded equal shares every quarter. On top of that, the profits that we get are then split quarterly between partners based on their ownership. So we're really striving in a lot of different ways to have basically to spread the wealth and according to your contribution to the company's success. As far as democracy is concerned, like Logan said, every organizational decision is voted upon. Members and team leaders, which we call captains, they are elected by their peers. Each project team, which we refer to as a ship, is self-organized, and it's run according to how those specific members of the ship want it run. And then transparency. So everyone knows how everyone else is being compensated, and you never wonder if someone's being paid more than you. Mm-hmm. And if they are, you can identify why the market will bear that, and you can work towards providing similar value.
Now, Fount has also built some tools to help implement this operating model. Can you talk about these tools and why you decided to invest in operationalizing your pirate code?
I guess the first thought on that is that we're primarily comprised of remote developers or nomadic workers. So obviously heavy use of things like Slack and other communication tools is kind of high up on our list. We've developed some free apps in-house to promote these ideals and share with the community. But I think the first one that comes to mind is the Vote Slack app, which is the way that we provide anonymous voting or an anonymous voting mechanism through Slack, which really supports our democratic approach to decision making. We've also published some other just productivity or entertainment-based apps, Export for Slack and Spoiler for Slack, which has surprising popularity and support out there.
And so internally, we've talked about how do we offer a piracy as a service platform in an honest way. We're not trying to rob anyone. We've built internally equity simulators to really help the engineering and design of the company and how we share profits. And we wanted to make it a way that says, your early founders and early people that come into the company are obviously rewarded because they have more skin in the game and they have a higher risk. But the idea is everyone who comes in and joins down this path is rewarded commensurately. That helps. That was an early tool internally that's just used for us, but we'd like to publish and find a way that makes it useful for others. But just moving forward, we're also interested in using ideas like smart contracts on the blockchain and to really formalize how we form ships and projects and distribute equity among partners going in the future.
Yeah, we feel like that could really be useful for others who might hope to implement a similar model of business, because we think that is something that really works out well.
Who are the other members of the Fount team?
So the other co-founders are Jack Dietrich and Ryan Van Middlesworth.
And we've got myself, Jordan Cardwell, along with Nick Fogel and Jay McAlilly as partners, and another full-timer, Carter Wooten, as well as several other part-time devs and designers that we reach out to as needed.
And tell us about your background and the experiences that led you to Fount.
I come from a different industry. I was previously a mechanical engineer working in the nuclear industry. And I worked on designing equipment and maintaining pieces of the manufacturing process. It was interesting. It taught me a tremendous amount about the engineering field, and I certainly have no regrets about how I worked there. But it really gave me an idea of what a top-heavy business structure looks like and how I did not want to see a company by myself run in the future. And I worked there for a few years, and then I started learning WordPress as a way to learn software development and actually just building a blog for my wife, and eventually started my master's in CS. So after that, I finally got my first job and moved back to Charleston at Zuby. And there I worked as just a full stack software dev. And it was a great eye-opening experience to help me, get an idea for how startups work and everything like that, and give me an experience to what a product company is. So at Zuby, that's where I met Jack and Ryan, and also met Brian, who was our another co-founder. He was our creative lead. That's kind of where the story started. We met, and after a while, we started Fount, and we said, this is how we want to try running a company differently. And it was really the perfect celestial alignment that allowed us to be incorporated in 2015.
On my end, basically, I did the whole computer science track through college and grad school, and then worked at a large utility on a sort of IT upper management track. And I really wasn't content with the opportunities for personal growth in the long run, and where I saw myself if I continued down that path. So started going to JS meetups and focusing on more exciting emerging technologies. Then eventually, changed jobs, did some small product work, government project work, digital agency work, and some contract work on the side as well. And ultimately ended up becoming the first non-founding partner at Fount, a little over a year and a half ago, I think. Really, each career move prior to Fount was kind of a move closer towards higher risk, more interesting work. And the Fount approach really just resonated with my experience and my years of industry experience and what I learned along the way.
What are some of the lessons that you think you've learned based on your experience at Fount that you might not have otherwise been exposed to at a more traditional business?
The first thing that comes to mind is that it's all about the right incentives. People always respond to incentives, and it's hard to incentivize desired outcomes while also removing incentives for undesired outcomes. And a lot of this centers around the egalitarian approach and trying to differ from the standard business model, where the top tier kind of reach the majority of the rewards, and those down below are stuck at a meager salary or something like that. Our previous traditional agency experience is still really valuable. That's another thing. We still see many of the same problems faced by traditional agencies, even though we eliminate some of them right out of the gate. It's probably that good talent is still really hard to come by. But we do think that by providing these right incentives, it's going to basically help us meet whatever needs lie ahead as far as attracting great developers, great talent that are passionate about what they do.
Sort of on the other side, Jordan had some good agency experience, which I never had. And this is the first business really that I've started off the ground. And just a few things, and this is probably just general across businesses, but starting a business is hard. It's a lot of work up front. But going further with what Fount is looking at is we ignored a lot of the orthodox practices of traditional businesses. So we have these problems like, I, as a founder, can be voted out of the company. That's scary, but I put that mechanism in place on purpose to not protect myself. And, I have to train myself not to be greedy, which it sounds easy, but when you're forming a business and figuring out how you're divvying up your company to new members coming on, that's really challenging initially. But as we started thinking about this holistically, about running the company for the company's success and not just a couple people, it became easier and easier to accept these things going forward. A few other things were, ownership. Finding out what that model looks like was a trial and error by us. And Jack, Ryan, and I spent a lot of time thinking about what are the right triggers and what are the right reward mechanisms. Interestingly, lawyers were equally confused about our model. And so we spent a lot of time going through explaining why we have a dynamic ownership model that changes every 3 months. And just lastly, on a personal level, I work as a developer for Fount, but I also help with the business operation. And so I personally have to be careful about how I spend my time on each job, as well as, my family at home. So time management is certainly very important.
What are the metrics or milestones that Fount looks at to measure success?
Revenue is obviously always a good target for that, but we haven't really focused on that, and things have shaken out okay, and we feel we're doing pretty well. But we think that'll just follow with what we have in place, with a framework for changing when things aren't working. So it's Fount providing the best experience for developers and designers as well as clients. Fount really tries to get out of the way so devs can enjoy being devs, and we feel that that'll end up working out, and we're going to end up being successful because of that. Our milestones can largely be driven by personal goals, and wherever those naturally merge with overall Fount vision, we think that will lead towards success. So I guess we haven't really set any particular metrics or milestones, but given everyone's happiness with what we're doing right now and the success and autonomy that we've all been able to experience, that's kind of a good milestone. That's kind of our litmus test. How's everybody doing? Is everyone loving it? Do we all have work? That sort of thing. So.
Yeah, if everyone's kind of bummed out at our happy hours, that's that's kind of an indication that something's not being orchestrated correctly.
Yeah.
Now, design and development studios and contract development is typically associated with the early stage ideas. But what are some of the reasons that a more established product or company with a dedicated development team might benefit from working with a contract development studio?
Yeah, I think the first obvious answer to that is that, certain internal projects for a company, they might exist outside of the core team's scope or abilities. So hiring full-time employees to meet those needs in this scenario, it's not always the best choice to bring on full-time employees. Also, external talent really can provide new ideas and aspects, insights towards innovation, which can affect internal teams and projects positively. And a lot of that has to do with a lot of our guys are really trying to stay on the cutting edge of new technologies and emerging new web technologies, et cetera. So they can bring in some experience, and the learnings that they have can really be spread throughout the other projects of the company. So,
taking that further, we've actually experienced these points as how Fount has provided value to companies of all stages. But just an extension on that, we like to think of ourselves as the AWS for developers. Sometimes a company will have a huge spike in workload, and there is a ramp-up time for employees to do that. And sometimes maybe the workload is a spike for like 3 months or less than 6 months. Fount can come in and solve these problems by the time it takes to ramp someone up. That's a pretty big selling point to have that, because obviously if you hire a full-time employee, it could work out great, but you have that ramp up and it may not work out great, and then you're out quite a bit of your resources there. The flexibility that we provide is sometimes we also allow like part-time roles to scale in as needed and sort of solve one-off problems. That has worked tremendously well for companies who have not a constant prediction on workload.
What does success over the long term look like for Fount?
I think this kind of goes again to maybe personal goals, but I'll just speak personally here. I'd love to see some products spun out of Fount. Internally, we call them labs projects, and we have, a bunch of ideas floating around, probably 10,000, and probably 3 of them are really good. All of us are pretty driven by the idea of building our own thing and seeing it try to see it succeed. And then, as far as the contract and consulting side, I'd love to see more global exposure and steady growth. I'm not necessarily interested in a hockey stick growth curve, because that could not be sustainable. But the growth that we've had has been very manageable and steady, and it's allowed us to sort of keep our vision and ideals as needed.
And I would just echo that as far as the products are concerned. I think working on your own products is everyone's dream. And, ultimately, if you can go away from doing paid work for someone else to working on your own thing and getting paid through the income that you earn through that, that's the ideal situation. But I'd also love to see us continue to branch out into as many different technological frontiers as possible. We've got a lot of guys with varied experience, and we've worked on some really cool stuff, but there's a lot of interesting things on there that we really want to delve into, like VR, blockchain, machine learning, IoT, and embedded devices. So basically any buzzword you can think of, we just want to get our hands dirty with that and work on the fun stuff.
Well, where can listeners go to learn more about Fount?
Probably the best place to start is the website, fountstudio.com. And, we have links there to our blog, some of the work we've done, a little bit about the team. And then we're also at Fount Studio on Twitter.
Logan Edwards and Jordan Cardwell, partners at Fount. Well, thank you for joining us on the show today, guys.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Fount's blog at blog.fountstudio.com is a fascinating read. I highly encourage listeners to check it out. It'll certainly challenge your assumptions about how businesses should operate to be successful. Fount's client list is impressive and features a couple of past Silicon Harbor Radio guests, Ceteris and Wave. Our partners at Silicon Harbor Magazine are a great resource for keeping up with all of the events and news in the Charleston technology, creative, and entrepreneur community. Visit them at siliconharbormag.com and follow them on Twitter at SiliconHBRMAG. You can follow us at TechLifePod and also find us on Facebook. The best way to keep up with the show is to subscribe. For iTunes, visit www.siliconharborradio.com or search for Tech Life with Rich Conte or Silicon Harbor Radio. If you enjoyed the show, let us know by leaving us a rating and a review. Subscribing via RSS is as simple as visiting techlife.libsyn.com/RSS. Before we go, I want to let listeners know about a couple of local events on Charleston's tech, entrepreneur, and creative community calendars. Tuesday, June 27th at 6 p.m., Startup Grind Charleston hosts Blue Acorn founder Kevin Eichelberger at the Harbor Entrepreneur Center location in the Pacific Box and Crate building. And of course, every Wednesday morning at 9 a.m., the Harbor Entrepreneur Center plays host to Charleston's 1 Million Cup event series. Head over to hear about emerging business ideas and offer your feedback. Finally, I want to once again thank Pitney Bowes Synpro for sponsoring this episode of Silicon Harbor Radio. That's all the time we have on this episode of Silicon Harbor Radio, brought to you by the Tech Life Podcast and Silicon Harbor Magazine. I'm your host, Rich Conte, and thanks for listening.